Please be seated. And the court continues on the record in 20 CR 1866. Parties and counsels are present. Jurors are present. Good morning. Good morning. And we'll continue just so the jurors are aware. To accommodate some witnesses, we are going to interrupt Mr. Pankey's testimony, take those two witnesses, and then we'll continue with his cross-examination after those witnesses have testified. So with that, Mr. Yorst.
Thank you, Your Honor. We would call Peggy Drake to the stand.
Thank you.
Can I go and get her, please?
Thank you.
Me. I know, I talked to her.
Good morning, ma'am. If I could have you come forward here, please. If I could have you face me for a moment, please, and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do so.
Thank you, ma'am. Have it take a seat there. And if I could ask, I'll have you move the microphone towards you first and then arrange them, move the whole base towards you. Wonderful. Thank you, ma'am.
Is that good?
I think so, yes, thanks. Mr. Furst.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, ma'am.
Hi.
Could you state your name and spell your last name, please?
Yes, sir. My name is Peggy Drake. D-R-A-K-E.
Thank you, Ms. Drake. Could you tell the jury a little bit about your educational and professional background?
I just retired in 2019 from police dispatch for Denver. I did about 5 years for Greeley, and then we combined with Weld County. I did a total of about almost 13 years, and almost 17 in Denver.
All right.
So before that, I had been in the Navy for about 4 years in my 20s.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Is it for police dispatch, are you considered a police officer, or is that a civilian job?
Civilian job.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. And did you grow up? Where did you grow up?
I grew up born in Greeley and right down here on 10th Avenue. I was raised till I was 12, and we moved to Kansas.
Okay.
And then everybody kind of ended up coming back.
All right. So did there come a time when your family came back to the Greeley area?
I think my folks ended up coming back about 78.
All right. And where did they live, to your knowledge?
Pardon? When they came here?
Where did they live, ma'am? Yes.
On 43rd Avenue Court.
Okay. And then did there come a time when you also lived on 43rd Avenue Court for some time?
Yes, I was living in Wichita, and I came for about 2 or 3 months before I went into the Navy. And then I was away for 4 years, and I came back, and when I got out it was about Thanksgiving of '84.
Thanksgiving of 84 was when you came back?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And were you living then on the 43rd Avenue courthouse for some period of time after that?
I think in 86, my ex-husband and he was working back and forth in Denver, and we ended up moving down to Littleton.
Okay. So where were you staying on the night of December 20th of 1984?
With my mom on 43rd Avenue Court.
All right. And you understand the significance of that night, I believe. That's the night that Jonelle Matthews disappeared?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Let me just get a little more family history if I could. Could you tell me, please, your relationship to Norris Drake?
Norris was my brother. I had 3 brothers. He was the middle one.
All right. So as far as family history goes, and I'm sorry to talk
That's
about
okay.
uncomfortable subjects, but did there come a time when your father passed away?
He passed away that September.
I'm sorry, ma'am.
It's okay.
There's a Kleenex there if you need it. 1984?
Yes, sir.
All right. I'm sorry.
He took his life.
My condolences, ma'am.
That's probably the reason we were there with my mom at that time.
Okay. And unfortunately, is Norris also now deceased?
Yes, he
All right.
died in March of 2007.
All right. All right, and are your other siblings still alive?
Pardon?
Are your other siblings still alive?
My oldest brother passed away about 12 years ago. He had MS.
Okay.
And then my brother, Kerry, 2 years older than me, he got here yesterday from Kansas City to be with my mom while I'm here today.
Okay. And your mom's still alive, but she's ill?
Yeah, she's 92.
Sure. I understand. All right, so I am gonna need to talk to you for just a few moments here
Certainly.
about December 20th of 1984 and your brother. Why don't I maybe start by pulling up, or have, please, the prosecution pull up Exhibit 60? All right, and is there a stick of some kind over there on your desk, Ms. Drake?
There's not, we can provide one.
Oh,
Is there what, sir?
we
Just
have a
give us
pointer.
1 moment, we have a pointer we'll provide to you. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you. All right, Ms. Drake, do you recognize that photo? Let me ask you a different way. Do you recognize the homes that are pictured in that photo?
it's a little hard to, but I guess that's our 43rd Avenue Court.
All right, and so let me just get a little bit more background, just to lay the foundation here. You live with your mother on 43rd Avenue Court. You were there in December of 1984?
Yes, sir.
And then how long were you there at that time?
Barely a month.
Okay. And then I think there came a time when you moved back in with her at some point later on?
Yes, and December of 88,
All right.
my ex-husband and I ended up getting a divorce, and I ended up coming back to Greeley.
And how long were you there at that time?
At that address, about 11 years.
No, but how long were you on 43rd Avenue Court when you moved back in 88? Was it 11 years? You stayed there?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so you stayed there for an additional 11 years, and
Yes.
then after that, did you move out of that house?
Yes.
All right.
My mom remarried at 72, and I got an apartment for a while, and then I went to Vegas for a year, and then I moved to Denver and started dispatching.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So you did live on 43rd Avenue Court, though, for some period of time?
Yes.
Okay. So would those houses then look, would that, the location of those houses look familiar to you then?
Yes, I notice.
Fourth Street is
Across the
on,
street looks familiar, and it's a little hard to see.
I understand. Fourth Street is there on the right, that's the,
Yes, sir.
okay.
Our house would have been this house, the third, I believe.
All right. And then which would the Matthews have been, if you recall?
The Matthews house would have been a little bit catty corner.
Okay. All right, thank you, ma'am. All right. All right, so let me just ask a little bit more background about
Okay.
Norris, if I could. So what was the age difference between you and Norris?
5 years.
All right. And I know it's not polite to ask a woman her age, but how old would you have been in '84?
I was 27.
All right, and how old then would Norris have been?
He would have been 32.
Okay. All right, and so and do you know what Norris's shoe size was?
I have no idea.
All right, that's fine.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I was just taking a chance.
It's okay.
All right. So I want to bring you back then to the night of December 20th of 1984.
Okay.
Okay? And let me again lay a little foundation for this because I know obviously it's a long time ago, right?
Yeah, I
Okay.
remember it.
But it was a pretty special night, you know, in the history of your neighborhood and in your lives, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. It was a very sad night.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And in fact, you would have, you would remember it because at least the following day, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth. How do you remember that night?
Well, I think when we all found out the next day that Jonelle was missing, everybody kind of, what were we doing that night? And that's how I remember it.
Okay. And as I understand it, you actually did you, before, I know in 1989, you had a conversation with a police officer, is that right?
Yes, Detective Ohm.
Yes. All right, and you saw him, was he sitting out in the hallway
Yeah.
this morning as well? All right,
I dispatched with his sister for 13 years.
okay. And then, but in 1984, December, in 1984, 1985, when the investigation started, did you talk to the police at that time?
I did not.
Okay, all right. Do you know whether Norris did?
I think he came over that morning. He had called me and I told him what happened and him and my mom, I believe, might have, but I don't ever remember talking to an officer that day. I don't know if I was cleaning up or running errands or what. I can't remember.
That's fine. All right, but after you became aware that, and when did you first become aware that Jonelle Matthews had disappeared, Ms. Drake?
I'm guessing about 8 in the morning, the neighbor, Nancy Brown, down the street called and told me.
All right. Did you see were there any officers out in the neighborhood when you woke up, or do you recall?
I don't think right then, I think later.
Okay.
Our house, we kept it pretty closed up in front, so.
Okay. When Norris, well, okay. So then, when you became aware the following day, the 21st,
Yes,
that she was missing, did you think back on the events of the night before?
yes.
All right. All right, so tell the jury, please, what you recall then, Ms. Drake, about the night before.
Okay. My brother had come over probably about 5 or 6 in the evening, and it was just, my ex-husband lived there too, but he worked in Denver. And we just visiting, having a good time. Norris was my brother was an alcoholic, but he was very pleasant that night. I didn't see any signs of him been drinking. We went downstairs and we watched Bill Cosby show. It was where he was up on a stage by himself, and we just laughed a lot because there was a lot of same things with our family, because he was talking about his kids and stuff a lot. And I remember my brother saying, "Yep, that's Peggy, that's Peggy." And I think that was on from 7 to 9. And then after that, I don't remember him leaving right away, but I do remember that I had told him it was time to go. We wanted to settle down and watch the news and get ready for bed. And he didn't leave right away. And then I remember feeling a little impatient with him and telling him again it was time to go, and he left.
Okay, so let me break that down a little bit.
Okay.
So first of all, do you know how Norris got to your mom's house that night?
I know he was driving a car or truck borrowed by Dave Davier, but I don't know what it was. I don't even think I looked out.
Okay, so you don't know where he parked then?
He would have parked in the drive.
Okay,
It was a big driveway and nobody parked. The street wasn't real safe right there to park on.
okay. Was your mom's vehicle also in the,
There was 2 cars in the garage.
okay. All right, and you remember watching I guess we determined that there were, ironically, 2 different Cosby shows on that night. There was a Cosby show and then a Cosby special. I don't know if did you know that or?
No.
Okay, that's fine. But as I understand what you're saying, you watched what would have been a Cosby special, is that fair?
It was on HBO. It was just, I don't know if what you want to call it. It was
Okay.
just a
All right.
stand-up, just him,
All right,
comedy or whatever.
all right, but it wasn't the regular, like NBC had a regular show?
No, sir. It was
okay.
on HBO.
Okay, that's fine. All right, so you remember watching that show on HBO, and it was, do you recall the time frame of when it started, when it ended? Do you recall that?
I think it was from 7 to 9.
Okay, all right. All right, and as far as when Norris left that night, I need to explore that with you for just a moment, all right?
That's fine.
Because you just gave a description of sort of the circumstances surrounding his departure, but when you talked to Detective Alm in 1989, did you give that same description of what happened when
No.
Norris left?
Because at that time, I didn't even know where this was going.
Well,
And,
right.
I thought I told him between 9 and 10, and we never really got into that part of it.
Okay. Right, so at one point you told Detective Alm between 9 and 10, and another point you said between 9 and 9:30. Do you recall that?
I don't.
Okay. If that's what the audio tape shows, would that be what you said?
Yes,
Okay,
of course.
all right.
I still don't quite remember, but I know it was before the news, and I still think it was probably closer to the news coming on, because I can remember being impatient with him and wanting him to go.
All right. Now, Ms. Drake, I'm not trying to be
It's
difficult
okay,
with
sir.
you, and I know you feel protective of your older brother. Is that fair to say?
Yes and no.
Okay. But again, you never said anything to Detective Alm about him leaving near the time of the news, or you telling him to leave, then he needed to leave the house, right? In 1989, you didn't say that to Detective Alm, is that fair?
I don't even remember the conversation really going, what we were doing that night, or,
Okay. All right, but you talked to Detective Alm for about half an hour about circumstances surrounding that night. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. Yes? Is that a
Some
yes?
of it.
Okay, all right. And what you said to Detective On that night would have been truthful, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, sure, of course. All right, let me just check my notes real quick and see if I have anything else, Your Honor.
Certainly.
All right, now as far as when Norris, okay, so let me clarify one thing. Norris, after he left that night, did he come back to the house at all that night?
No.
Okay. And you believe he came back some point the next day, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. You did not really know the Matthews very well, is that fair to say?
No, sir. When my dad passed away, there was a few neighbors that kind of rallied around our family, and I got to know them, but I did not know the Matthews.
I understand. You did recall, at least in 1989, that Jonelle was well developed for her age?
Yes.
Okay.
I think a lot of that comes from just talking with the neighbors and talking about things and,
All right. All right, I understand. But you saw Jonelle outside her house sometimes also?
yeah, I would see the Matthews.
Okay. I believe that's all I have for the moment. Thank you, Ms. Drake, for coming in today.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Viorst. Mr. Work?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Drake.
Hi, Mr. Rourke.
I want to start with an answer you just gave a couple of questions ago. Mr. Viorst asked you if you were being protective of your older brother, and you said yes and no. Tell me about that. Why do you say yes and no?
I love my brother very much. He was always very loving to me. We were close, but we did have a lot of problems with him through the years with his alcohol.
May I approach the photograph, Your Honor?
You may.
Mr. Drake, I want to make sure I'm understanding something. You had pointed out this home is the home that you were talking about on 43rd Avenue Court. We've heard testimony that that was your house.
Let me see.
Can you clear that? And Judge,
No, it's the
She's welcome to step
third
down.
house.
okay,
We were the third house.
okay. I just wanted to make sure that we're talking,
Yeah,
that's the
this
house?
would have been Hafner's.
That was the Hafner's, okay.
Mhm.
Perfect, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Second, Bill, can I have Exhibit 217, please? Mr. Drake, I know you've given a lot of thought to the television programs and when certain things happened that night over many years, correct?
Yes, I remember that night pretty well.
Okay. And as a matter of fact, just the other day, you had seen something on the news about this trial, and you had heard, there was a reporting about some previous testimony, and you sent Detective Cash a text message, unsolicited, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And in that text message, you said, in essence, I'm sorry to bother you, but I wanted to give you some information.
Yes.
I saw in the paper that Mr. Viorst said we watched the Cosby Show from 8 to 8:30. It wasn't the Cosby Show we watched. So if I can approach again, Your Honor.
You may.
What I've showed you, or what I have up here on the screen, and I know it's a little bit difficult to see, Ms. Drake, this is Exhibit 217. This was a TV guide that was in the Greeley Tribune on Sunday, December 18th of 1984.
Okay.
Okay? This is Thursday, so that would have been December 20th, correct?
Yes.
At 7 o'clock on Channel 4, The Cosby Show. Do you remember that program generally?
Oh, yeah, we would watch it, but I don't have a recollection of it being on that night.
It was a sitcom, right?
Yes.
He was Dr. Huxtable and he had a family and he was a doctor and all kinds of different things,
Right.
right? On Channel 20, which according to the exhibit is HBO, is a movie entitled Bill Cosby Himself.
Yep, that's what we watched.
And it ran from 7 to 9.
Yes.
And I think you said, and you told Detective Cash in the text, he meaning Mr. Cosby, was sitting on a stool or on a chair on a stage.
Yes.
It was a sitcom, or it was a, stand-up comedy.
Yes.
Okay. And then you talked to Detective Cash in this text that you sent him about some efforts that you had undertaken to try to find the TV guide, but you could only find an Eastern Standard Time
I
listing.
couldn't find any TV guide, and so I thought, well, newspapers, and so I could only find one for Florida
Okay.
and one for Texas. I couldn't find anything for Colorado.
Okay, so you were trying to backtrack then to what Mountain Standard Time would have been
Yes.
in 1984. Okay.
And by doing so, looking at the Florida and Texas, then
Sure.
I figured my time remembrance was correct.
Okay. And then obviously you've answered this question several different times today, but I'll ask it one more time. Your recollection is that he left, Norris Drake left your home and your mother's home right before the news started.
I'm not 100% sure.
Sure.
I know he left before the news, but I remember I asked him to leave the first time, and he didn't, and then I felt really impatient, and I had that feeling like the news was coming on,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
To be clear, back in the day, and I can pull up the exhibit if you want, the Channel 2 news came on at 9:30. Do you remember that?
No,
Okay. All of the major news networks, 4, 7, 9, 31 didn't exist yet, came on at 10 o'clock, correct?
correct.
So are you talking about that 10 o'clock news?
Channel 4 still watch it today.
Okay. You said on direct examination when Mr. Viorst asked you that you got up about 8 o'clock the next morning? Or you got up, I'm sorry, I mischaracterized that. You learned about Jonelle's disappearance about 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, and I'm guessing at that, but it was early when Nancy called me.
Okay. And then when you heard that, you called your brother and told him?
No, I don't even know if I had his number.
Oh, okay.
He
Okay.
called shortly after that,
Okay,
and that's when I told him what happened.
gotcha. Okay. Your Honor, I have one question that's beyond the scope of direct examination, but we also have Ms. Drake under subpoena. If I can ask that question by way of a direct question, open-ended question, so we don't have to call her back.
Any objection?
No objection.
Thank you.
Were there any police officers that lived in your neighborhood that you know of?
At that time, no.
Okay.
Years later, when I started working at the police station, Bill West lived around the corner, but
Okay. Did you know of a neighbor named Charlie Clark? Don't know that name? How about David Shelton?
David who?
David Shelton? Retired from the sheriff's office? Okay. Ms. Drake, I appreciate your time this morning. Thank you. That's all the questions I have, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Rourke. Mr. Viorst?
Thank you. All right, so do you recall whether or not you told Detective Alm in 1989 that you had asked Norris to leave, but he wouldn't leave?
I don't think we talked about it. I
Okay.
don't think, when we got called to the police station, we just thought it was like a neighborhood survey thing. We thought it was kind of stupid we were going because we didn't know anything. And I don't even remember him getting into detail with me about that.
Okay. All right, well, he asked you about the circumstances surrounding that night, correct? What else did you talk about?
He asked me what time Norris left, and he,
Okay. All right. All right.
I think we talked about who was living at the house.
Okay. Which was you and your mom, and I guess your then husband,
Yes, my ex-husband.
your ex-husband, right? He wasn't on the premises until
He
later.
worked in Denver. He didn't get home till 11 midnight every night.
Okay, that's fine. All right, and you asked Norris to leave, but he wouldn't leave. Is that your testimony?
Well, he just was having a good time and didn't want to leave.
All right.
We were just kind of wanting to settle down for the night.
Okay. But I think your testimony was you didn't usually go to bed till around midnight, right?
I think that night I did, but at that time I wasn't working, and
Right.
we had a couch up in our middle bedroom, and I'd sit on that a lot and wait for my husband to come home.
Okay. Now, do you recall telling Detective Alm that the way you found out about Jonelle's disappearance was that you saw the cars outside when you, in that morning? And, do you recall that or no?
No, I remember later there was cars, police cars, but I found out through Nancy Brown calling me.
Okay.
Now, a neighbor or somebody could have come over afterwards, but I don't remember.
Okay. All right, and if you told Detective Alm that Norris left between 9 and 9:30, would that, do you think, is that something you might have said, or is that, or not?
Yeah, I think I gave a general thing, 9 to 10. I might have corrected it. I don't remember, sir.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Forrest.
No other questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any questions from the jurors? Very well. Seeing none, thank you, ma'am.
Am I complete?
So you're done. You're welcome to stay or go as you wish.
Okay.
Have a good day, ma'am.
Thanks, the court, so much for working with me with my
Absolutely.
mom.
Absolutely,
I
no problem.
appreciate it.
Wish you well. And Mr. Forrest?
Your Honor, we would call Detective Carl Alm to the stand.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. I'll have 0 questions. Unless Rob wants to do something. Rob, you want to do it? You take it. No. Hey, Rob, point out there's no Oh, did she? Isn't she sitting over in the vet, village vet? Yeah, I presume. Okay.
Good morning, sir. If I could have you come forward here. If I could have you raise your right hand, please. You solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you, sir. Have you take a seat there, please. And then you're welcome to take your mask off if you wish.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Forrest.
Good morning, sir.
Morning.
Could you state your name and spell your last name, please?
My name is Carl Alm. Last name spelled A-L-M.
Thank you, sir. And are you currently retired?
I am on my 3rd career. I'm retired as a police officer.
Okay, fair enough. Why don't you just tell the jury, please, what your various careers have been?
Well, I went broke farming in 1985, so Then I headed to the police department for 30 years. And after retiring about 6.5 years ago, I'm now a property manager, real estate investor, and on the farm again with some cows.
Okay, so you're still doing some real estate investing and some farming,
Yes.
all right, but you're no longer working as a police officer,
No.
all right. But you did that for 31 years, you said?
It was 29 years, 9.5 months. I call it 30 years.
All right, we'll round up, that's fine. And when did you leave that profession, detective?
March, 6.5 years ago, however that calculates out to a year.
That's fine. All right, and in which police department were you at?
The Greeley Police Department.
All right, and what rank what was your highest rank that you achieved?
Lieutenant.
All right, so I'll call you Lieutenant Om. Lieutenant Om, in the course of were you at the police station, were you at the police department when Jonelle Matthews disappeared?
No, I was not.
All right, when did you start?
May 28th of 1985.
All right, so just a few months afterwards. Did you do some follow-up investigation relating to the disappearance of Jonelle Matthews?
Yes.
All right, and what efforts did you undertake in that regard?
That was in 1989 when I insisted in the investigation of Norris Drake.
All right, I wasn't clear if you said insisted or assisted?
Assisted.
Assisted, okay. All right, and who was sort of leading that investigation at that point?
Keith Olson, Detective Olson.
Okay, so he was one of your colleagues at that time?
Yes.
All right. So, as part of your assistance in that investigation, what did you do?
Of course, you've probably all heard this before. It's been 32 years, so I'll do the best I can. And we had a brief time in late 1989 that we looked at Nordy Drake, and my major contribution was interviewing his sister, Peggy Drake, who was one of our dispatchers at the time.
She was a Greeley Police Department dispatcher?
Yes, she was.
Okay. And you know her personally?
Just, yeah, personally, but not well.
Okay, that's fine. All right, so I just then wanted to ask you a few things about that investigation, or that discussion, I guess, that interview. As far as the discussion, the interview that night, what was the subject of the interview, detective or lieutenant?
The subject was to see if we could gather any more information on the movements and activities of all the Drake family, and especially Nordy, the night that Jonelle disappeared.
Okay. And in that regard, did you learn that Nordy had been over at his mother's home that evening?
Yes.
All right. All right, and what were you told by Ms. Drake as far as when he left the house?
She said she didn't know for sure when he left. It was 5 years later already at that time, but she said she thought 9 or 10 that night.
Okay. And did she indicate that she asked him to leave the house?
No, I don't think she asked him to leave the house. I think they just were kind of wrapping up an evening together watching TV, and he just left when he was ready to leave.
Okay. As far as when she found out about the disappearance of Jonelle Matthews, did she tell you how she found out?
She, and I'm not quite sure, I recall she mentioned that there were police cars outside, and then she mentioned, I think there were calls from the neighbors, and they discovered that Jonelle had disappeared.
All right, but what was the first indication she had that Jonelle was missing?
I would have to double check. I don't have a report.
That's fine. We won't need to go into that much depth. But it was there were cars outside and phone calls.
Yes, yes.
Okay, that's fine. Just to clarify one thing about phone calls back in the day, because you're obviously younger than me, but perhaps a little older than some of the jurors. Do you recall in 1984 how people made phone calls to each other?
We had one phone in my house and it hung on the wall.
Okay. No cell phones at that time?
No.
Okay. All right. Did there later come a time in your discussion with Ms. Drake where she indicated it could have been that Norris could have left between 9 and 9:30?
Yeah, we talked about that when I had the transcript to review, and I'm the one, when I was summarizing her statement back to her, listed as 9 to 9:30. She said, and after a couple other sentences, she replied, uh-huh.
Okay. All right. That's all I have, Detective. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Fewhurst. Mr. Miller?
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
You kind of touched on it when you were answering questions from defense counsel, but you said that you didn't have a report. Do you recall drafting a report about that, or just letting the interview speak for itself?
I recall drafting reports, and that was my practice in those days.
Do you know if Keith Olson made reports either or not? Do you have any idea if he did?
Keith made reports, and that was our practice. That was our procedure.
Do you know if Tom Waldy was involved in this as well?
Yes, he was.
And do you know if he did a report?
I imagine he did a report. That was his practice.
All right. No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Ms. Fewhurst?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any questions from the jurors? Very well, seeing none. Thank you, sir. And I presume he's released from subpoenas as well.
He is.
All right. Please.
Your Honor, may we sidebar for just a sec?
We may. Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. It's a little early, but we'll take our mid-morning break now. And then we'll just anticipate for everyone to be prepared to sit through until noon for the rest of the morning. So I will advise you again that until the trial is completed, it's not discuss the case with anyone. That includes your family, people involved in the trial, other jurors, or anyone else. If someone approaches you and tries to discuss the trial with you, please let me know about it immediately. Please do not attempt to gather any information about the case. Don't do any research. Don't expose yourself to any news or other social media. And finally, do not express or form any opinion until it is finally submitted to you. So we'll have you back here. I'm going to tell you 10:10, and we'll do the best we can to get that mark. All right, 10:10, please. Thank you. Please rise. Please be seated. All right, counsel, any issues?
No, sir. No, Your Honor.
All right, be back here, please, at 10 after 10. Thank you.
Yeah, because that's document. I've never seen Michael do this. They just, I guess he is. Right.
Yeah, that's what he said, Tesla.
What does Texas have to do with? They're Virgo. Jeremy Garcia. Tennessee.
Sharon Stala.
After Defendant?
It's gonna go right now. So we're gonna let Peggy do the cleanup, but Sharon Stala she's in the Scotia, I don't know.
I know.
She's been here a long time ago, I kind of forgotten about her. She just shut up. So, I'm gonna call her. We just interviewed her.
I don't know.
Please rise.
Please be seated, thank you. I did, but I thought they would leave. They wouldn't leave and I couldn't. I can exit real quick and I'll reboot it. That'll do it.
Oh. Let's hear this traffic DOC.
If you're the meeting host, enter the host PIN followed by pound. If you're not the host, press pound.
you know, are they signing back in?
Can you sign back?
Okay, no problem, thanks. Though I can lock it
She's not
after
hiding.
the.
Jen, how do I get on your hotspot? What is it?
Oh, she is mine.
Oh, okay, cool.
All right, you get to do something.
Great, let me look at it.
We took the pointer off. All right, court is back on the record in 20 CR 1866. Parties and counsel are present. Any issues we need to address?
Could we have a couple extra minutes? Defense counsel just said he has a witness we weren't aware he was calling today. So we're trying to pull the reports up.
Very well.
That's fine, Your Honor. Just one other brief issue. I just want to make sure, Mr. Pankey's just a little bit concerned because of the pandemic and everything. He just wants to make sure that during cross-examination that his personal space is respected.
Oh, I'm not going anywhere near him, Judge, so that's fine.
Okay.
That's
All right, if there's a need to approach for whatever reason, then we'll be respectful of that. And,
Yes, sir.
all right, so that should address it. Thank you.
She's mine, I'm looking at it.
So let me clarify, are you calling another witness
I've got
now?
one 5-minute witness. Yeah, I do, Your Honor. I'm sorry. She was under subpoena and I frankly had sort of forgotten about her and she showed up this morning and I'm like, okay. She
Okay.
does have pertinent information I think that I need to present.
Certainly. I just wasn't sure the timing, but that's fine.
Yeah, I'm ready to call her. She's gonna be literally no more than 10 minutes. And as soon as they're ready, I'm ready. So your network is VAO2? All right. I don't know. There it goes. Perfect. Thank you. All right, so you ready to go? Ready? Yeah, next like you have the crisis we discussed yesterday. Yeah. Okay. And you gotta distinguish between why should we do
You're gonna do that one? Okay. Your Honor, I think we're ready whenever the court is.
Thank you. Anything else then?
No, sir. No, Your Honor. No.
Please rise. Yeah. Please be seated. And the court continues on the record in 20 CR 1866. Parties and counsel are present. The jurors are present. Mr. Viorst,
Your Honor, we're going to call Sharon Stala to the stand if I may go get her.
please, thank you. Good morning, ma'am. If I could have you come forward here, please. And if I could have you raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you, ma'am. Have a take a seat there. And then you're welcome to take off your mask if you wish.
Thank you.
And I'll ask you to arrange the microphone so you can speak directly into it. And if you want to pull it towards you, please. The whole base moves. Just bring it towards you. There you go. I think that will work. All right, thank you. Mr. Viorst.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Could you state your name and spell your last name, please?
My name is Sharon K. Stala, S-T-A-H-L-A.
Thank you, ma'am. Could you give the jury a very brief synopsis of your education and professional background?
Okay, I have a master's degree in elementary education. I taught at Kersey for 31 years at Platte Valley Elementary School.
All right, thank you. And I sorry, just to explain how and do you currently live in Greeley?
Yes, I do.
Did you live in Greeley in 1984?
Yes, I live close to the University of Northern Colorado, Central Greeley.
All right. What school did you work at in 1984?
Platte Valley Elementary School.
All right, and who was the principal there?
Jim Matthews.
All right. Is that why you were initially interviewed in this matter, as far as you know?
I believe so, yes.
All right, that's fine. Ms. Stala, I want to ask if you, you don't live anywhere near, in 1984, you didn't live anywhere near the Matthews home, or
No.
not within a few miles anyway, is that fair
No,
to say?
no.
Okay, and you didn't know them? Well, you knew Jim Matthews.
I
but-
knew Jim as my boss, but I did not know the family.
Right.
Personally.
Fair enough, you didn't know Jonelle,
That's right.
you hadn't met her.
I met her once when Jim first started at Platte Valley. He brought his family out, but that was the only time that I ever met her.
Okay. And regarding the circumstances surrounding her disappearance, you have no real firsthand knowledge, is that fair?
That's correct.
Okay. Did there come a time when you learned about the circumstances surrounding her disappearance?
Yes.
And where did you learn that?
I learned a great deal from a program that was on television
Okay.
concerning the disappearance of Jonelle.
Okay. And what program was that?
I believe it was called Unsolved Mysteries, and the host of that program was John Walsh.
All right. And what did you learn about the circumstances surrounding the exterior of the home on the night of December 20th of 1984?
I learned that there was snow on the ground, But I knew that because of the day after Jonelle disappeared, we had snow on the ground. So I knew that there was snow on the ground. And there was information that was given about how some of the tracks around the house had been destroyed by a rake.
All right. And you believe you learned that on television?
I learned that on television, yes.
Okay, and what year would that have been?
That would have been 4 or 5 years after Jonelle's disappearance. I don't know the exact year.
Okay. That's all I have, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Yorst. Ms. Wells?
It's Mrs. Stala?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
So you indicated that Jim Matthews was your boss in 1984. What was your technical title at the elementary school?
I was a fourth grade teacher at the elementary school.
Okay. So did you see Jim Matthews that school year almost on a daily basis?
Oh, yes.
Okay. And do you recall having a conversation with Detective Cash on July 15th of 2014?
Yes.
Okay. In that conversation, do you recall telling Detective Cash that Jim had told you information such as Jonelle not being found for a couple hours?
Jim didn't tell me that information.
Okay. Well, you don't recall telling Detective Cash that it was Jim that you had heard
I don't
information
recall
from?
that, no.
Okay. And do you recall telling him that the Matthews residence had a gravel driveway?
Yes.
Okay.
And I want to express that I've never been to Jim Matthews' house. I'm going strictly by what was on television.
Okay. I just have a few more questions.
Sure.
Do you recall telling Detective Cash that the gravel driveway was raked or something, so all the tire marks were gone except the Matthews car that had been driven into the driveway?
Again, that was based on that television program.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Wells. Mr. Yorst, you redirect?
All right, so, Ms. Taylor, just to clarify, you don't recall Mr. Matthews telling you about the circumstances surrounding
No.
Jonelle's disappearance?
Mr. Matthews and I never discussed this at all.
Okay. And you recall being aware that the snow around the house was raked on that?
Yes.
Okay. Nothing further.
Thank you, Mr. Yorst.
That's all I had, Your Honor.
Thank you. Ms.
Nothing, Your
Wells?
Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the jurors? Very well. Seeing none, thank you, ma'am. I step down.
Thank you.
And you're free to stay or go as you wish. Have a good day. Counsel, am I correct?
Yeah, we're ready to recall.
Recall Mr. Pankey? Mr. Pankey. Thank you. So, Mr. Pankey, sir, if I could have you come forward to the witness stand, please. And I'll ask that you confirm for the record that you understand that you remain under oath.
I do, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir.
Your Honor, as you recall from yesterday, I had wrapped up my initial direct examination, but I did just want to move for the admission of Defense Exhibit F at this time.
Any objection? Thank you. Court proceeds into evidence, Defendant's Exhibit F.
Thank you.
Mr. Rourke.
Thank you. You had a saying that you had prominently posted in your apartment in Twin Falls, Idaho. Do you remember that saying?
Good morning to you, too.
Did you understand my question, Mr. Pankey?
Not really.
Do you recall an Edmund Burke quote that you had prominently posted in your
Oh,
apartment in
yeah.
Twin Falls? Please don't
Yeah.
interrupt me. Let me ask my question. Okay? Do you recall that quote?
Yes.
The quote reads, "All it takes for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing." Correct?
Correct.
That's what you've done for 37 years. Nothing. Right? You've done nothing to ease the pain of the Matthews family. You've done nothing to come forward with information that you had about your involvement in Jonelle Matthews' murder and disappearance, correct?
I guess you're testifying.
I'm asking you a question, Mr. Pankey.
You keep asking questions and you don't give me time to answer.
Answer my question, Mr. Pankey.
I did some things that were wrong.
Oh, I know. You've demanded a deal, correct?
Yes,
You've demanded immunity.
yes.
To be clear, I want to make sure that you and I are on the same page going forward. What do you mean by the word deal? Describe that for them.
A deal would have been that, number one, I wouldn't have to reveal who my source was, and I would say what was said. The district attorney would agree that they would not reveal who they got the information from. They would not force me to testify against anyone. And that there would be a stipulation that my multiple statements on what happened between December 20th and December 26th, 1984 was true.
That's your definition of a deal?
Yes,
Would you also agree that a deal typically means that an individual pleads guilty to a lesser charge in exchange for some promises from the DA's office? Right?
I don't think that's necessarily true. When a person takes the Fifth Amendment, they're not necessarily guilty, and I think in a deal, they're not necessarily guilty. I had been charged with 20 misdemeanors that were, your office handled them or dismissed them. I felt that I was like a
Mr. Pankey, I didn't ask how you felt. I asked what your definition of a deal was, okay? Here's what we're gonna have an understanding with, sir, going forward, is I get to ask the questions and you get to answer only my question, okay? And if you don't understand the question, please let me know, okay?
Okay.
Thank you. Your goal, since December 20th of 1984, has been self-preservation. Would you agree? You're looking out for yourself.
Not necessarily.
And you like that phrase too, not necessarily, right? We'll talk about that one in a little while. You could have given the Matthews family closure that they so richly deserved years ago, couldn't you?
I don't know what you mean.
Okay. And now yesterday, you get up on that stand and you basically thumb your nose at everybody in the room and say, ha ha, never mind, I made it all up. Is that what you want us to believe?
That's what I want. That's the truth.
Still can't give the Matthews family that closure that they deserve, can you?
I don't have all the pieces of the puzzle.
For 37 years, you've created an agenda, a narrative, that you've offered to the public about this case, haven't you?
I would say only since 1992, but you...
So for 19 years, you've had an agenda, a narrative, that we've heard over and over again, and it typically starts like this. I didn't know Jonelle Matthews existed until 6 days after her disappearance, right?
Yes,
That's how you start it. And you typically talk about how the fact that you've been charged with 20 misdemeanors over the course of time, right? You love that one.
yes.
And your narrative intensified on April 8th, 2019, when that gentleman called you on the telephone, right?
Yes,
That sent you into a frenzy. Because all of a sudden now, what you've been asking for years, meaning the police to come talk to you, is actually occurring. Right?
yes.
Yeah. And it gets ramped up even more after August of 2019 when they knock at your front door. Because now you're thinking, oh man, now they're really coming after me, right?
That is not what I was thinking.
That's not what you were thinking?
No.
But you still demanded immunity before you would say anything to them. Correct? You told them, I want immunity. I want a deal.
Yes.
So if I accept what you said yesterday as true, it would have been very easy for you at that point to say, law enforcement officers, never mind, I made it up. But you didn't do that, did you? You didn't do that. Did you?
I started to.
You started to. Then you started blaming your dead father-in-law and a cop because you had this vendetta against cops.
Yes.
You even created an action plan in your own device, in your own computer, about what you were going to do.
Yes.
Interestingly enough, we're going to talk about that action plan in a little while. You know what's notably missing? The claim that you made all this up. That's nowhere in your action plan. Did you know that?
Yes.
You also like the word experiences, right? You use that quite a bit. You used it yesterday when talking about your first experience being fearful of an adult or a cop was when you were 4 or 5. Remember?
Yes.
You said that.
Yes.
Do you know, Mr. Pankey, that what you told the jury yesterday about that incident when you were 4 or 5 is almost verbatim a chapter out of your book, Graveyards? Did you know that?
I'm not totally sure.
Could just be part of the narrative, the agenda that you've created, and you just forgot that little connection?
No, that's fact.
When you were at Ames Community College, you took elective courses in psychology and sociology?
Yes.
And in 2019, like we said, you told Detective Cash that the info you have might be real or imaginary,
Yes.
but in order for me to talk, I need a deal.
Yes.
And you told us yesterday, and pardon my language, I didn't want all this bullshit to come out in the public.
Yes.
Mr. Pankey, you have made every effort to manipulate everyone who you've come into contact with about the Jonelle Matthews case since December 20th of 1984, haven't you?
No.
The truest thing you've ever said is you're a master manipulator, right?
Maybe.
Yeah. You wrote that in a brief to an Idaho appellate court, right?
I may have.
We'll talk about it in a little while. But the latest group that you want to manipulate now are these ladies and gentlemen of the jury by saying, I made it all up.
No.
So let's establish some foundation, some baseline for everything we're going to talk about going forward. From the day you were charged, you've had access to all the discovery in this case, haven't you?
I have not.
You haven't.
I've had some discovery access.
But you've read it all or had it read to you.
I have read parts of it.
You've only read parts of the discovery that exist in your murder case.
I have read the stuff that Mr. Viorst's office has sent to me.
You've had time to digest that.
What's that?
You've had time to digest it. You know what the information is that you've read. You understood it.
I am not a lawyer.
Well, you've played one before, haven't you? On your own behalf.
It's called pro se.
Okay. You also had a law firm called the law firm of S. Pankey.
I never had a law firm.
Oh, but you ordered books under the auspices of the law office of S. Pankey.
I ordered law books and they called me S. Pankey.
The law firm of S. Pankey, to be clear.
LexisNexis did.
And you've had 37 years to think about what you were going to say if you ever had to sit on that stand. And that's what you came up with yesterday? I made it up?
Yes.
A couple of small things I want to talk about. You keep talking about this bisexual or homosexual history that you have. Did you disclose that sexual orientation to the Army?
Yes.
You did.
Yes.
They let you in the Army claiming that you were a homosexual in 1975?
No.
I'm confused then.
Yes, you are.
Did you tell them you were bisexual or homosexual?
I admitted it when I was caught
Caught what?
with another soldier.
And that's the reason you were discharged from the Army?
Yes.
You sure you want to stick with that one, Mr. Pankey? Or do you want to rethink your answer on that one?
I want that answer. It's the truth.
Nowhere in your certified military records is there any indication that you were ever caught with another soldier. Nowhere.
That would have to be explained.
So the Army made a mistake in just leaving those parts out.
I think they agreed to leave them out.
Do you know that for sure?
No.
And you want this jury to believe that although you didn't take a single criminal justice credit at Ames Community College, they agreed that you could just lie about it and say, I do too have a minor in criminal justice, and Ames is okay with that. That's what you want us to believe?
I told the truth.
That doesn't answer my question. You want us to believe that Ames Community College willingly allows you to misrepresent a degree that you received from their institution?
Objection, speculation.
Sustained.
What you said yesterday was Ames agreed to let you say you had a criminal justice degree when you never took a single credit.
They agreed that I could say it was a minor. I did work on criminology in the psychology classes.
Okay. So let's go back to this notion of you being a master manipulator for a moment. You really didn't have much left to testify about yesterday other than, I must have made it up, unless you're guilty. And we're going to talk about your defense strategy in a little while.
I don't understand that. Was there a question in there?
Yeah, let me ask a different question. Do you know what the term gaslighting means?
No.
You haven't ever heard that one before?
No.
The term is used to describe a person who puts forth a false narrative which leads another person or group to doubt their own perceptions and become disoriented or distressed. You've never heard that term?
Never heard it.
So when I say that, clearly you have been involved in the act of gaslighting in most of your relationships. You won't understand what I mean.
Objection, argumentative.
Simple cross-examination question.
Overrule. If he knows, he can answer.
You won't understand what I mean by that.
I understand what you mean by that.
You engaged in that kind of conduct, that kind of behavior during your marriage with Angela.
To a certain extent.
Certainly with law enforcement. Every law enforcement officer you've come into contact with about
No.
your life. No?
That is an exaggeration on your part.
Okay. So when Detective Prill comes to interview you as a witness in Twin Falls, Idaho, and you in turn turn around because you don't like the direction the interview went and accuse him of spitting on you and assaulting you, that's not gaslighting?
It was unethical what Detective Pearl was doing.
And you still want to persist in this notion that he spit on you and assaulted you?
By spitting on me, he assaulted me.
He's not the only one you've accused of spitting on you over the course of your writings, is it?
I also accused the judge of doing that.
Did that judge spit on you too?
Yes,
Did you hear in the recording of the interview with you out on the bench in front of your Twin Falls condominium, the point in time where Detective Prill got in your face and say, "Steve, I need to talk to you," and spit on you?
Judge,
it was edited.
Judge, I would just like clarification that there's been no allegation that this court has spit on Mr. Pankey. I want to make that clear.
Oh, I didn't say that.
No.
I didn't insinuate that, and if I did, certainly my apologies.
All right, thank you.
Judge Kearns has not spit on me.
That's correct.
Thank you.
So the portion of the recording where that happened was edited out?
I think so, I don't know.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll just introduce later the entirety of it then, and we can see whether that occurred, okay?
Okay.
So what I want to do now, Mr. Pankey, is get outside of this preconceived, preset agenda, this narrative that you have created, and let's talk about some things that really happened, okay? First of all,
Objection, argumentative.
Sustained.
you've been trying for decades to convince everyone you come into contact with that you're an above-average guy, haven't you? In terms of intelligence, in terms of everything that you have tried to do in the course of your lifetime.
That's not true.
Oh. But you've been unsuccessful at virtually every turn because you lost every election that you ran for sizably, correct?
True.
Do you know what a GT score is? In the Army? A general technical score?
I've never heard that term.
Okay. Do you know that your GT score from the military, from the U.S. Army was 100? And that puts you right squarely average? Did you know that?
That's probably true.
Okay.
I didn't know that, no.
And you haven't been able to hold a job for very long in the course of your lifetime, correct? You had a lot of jobs.
I've had a lot of jobs.
The NOCO Detective Agency, 7-Up, a welder, a church janitor, a used car salesman, all these, mortuary services.
Yes.
One of the things you talk about in many of your writings was the fact that you absolutely despised the notion that you were unprepared when these gentlemen showed up at your door. Right?
Yes.
They blindsided you.
Yes.
You didn't have time to prepare.
Yes.
But if you made it all up, what would you have to prepare?
They blindsided me.
What would you have to prepare if you had simply made it all up?
I thought it was unethical what they did.
Did you want, Mr. Pankey, do you understand my question? What would you have had to prepare if the truth is, in your reality, that you simply made all of this up? What would you have to prepare?
He wanted me to get on the phone with you, which I thought was unethical as all get out.
Mr. Pankey, why aren't you answering my question?
I am answering your question.
What would you have had to prepare? What would you have had to make? What would you have had to get ready?
You knew, and Detective Pearl knew, that I had hired a Korean attorney named Hong Pak.
Why does his ethnicity matter?
It does matter because you didn't respect him.
I'm going to try one more time, Mr. Pankey. What information, what materials, what narrative, what agenda would you have had to prepare in order to speak with Detective Prill and Detective Cash?
My attorney had that. You went around my attorney, which is unethical.
You told Angela that you were blindsided and you didn't have an opportunity to plan, correct?
I may have.
And you wrote about how much you hated the fact that the affidavit to get into your apartment, your townhome, was sealed. You hated that.
Yes.
In fact, you were going to run on a platform as sheriff to eliminate the ability to seal documents, weren't you?
To put more checks and balances on sealing documents.
Okay. Because you wanted to dispute the claim that you had any association with the property where Jonelle was found, and you believed that information was in that affidavit. right?
Not necessarily, I didn't see the affidavit, I didn't know what was in it.
But you tried hard to get it.
Yes, through my attorney.
But if you made all this up, why was that so important? Why was it so important to see what was in an affidavit if you knew in the back of your mind, I got nothing to worry about, I made it up?
Because I've had police in the past make up things regarding me.
You did have some close association with the property where Jonelle Matthews' body was found, didn't you?
No,
You lived right near it 2 different times. You lived near Kersey and you lived in the trailer park right off of County Road 49, right where her body was found. Right?
no, you said it was 10 miles away.
I didn't say anything, Mr. Pankey. I'm asking you the question.
That's what the discovery shows. Everybody has lived 10 miles from a crime scene.
And you drove County Road 49 fairly regularly. The Kersey cutoff?
No,
You never did.
I don't know that I never did, I don't know that I did.
And in fact, you even have said in interviews that at the time Jonelle Matthews disappeared, you knew there was no oil and gas development on that property.
I think it was a wilderness area.
At every turn during your civil cases, your criminal cases, you have tried to use Jonelle Matthews as leverage, haven't you?
Yes,
To try to get out of civil suits, criminal convictions, other appeals that you have dealt with pro se. You've used her as leverage.
there was only one criminal conviction,
The one where you vomited in a bank.
right? And that was, Mr. Pack got that overturned.
But you used her as leverage at every turn.
Yes,
And you knew every time you referenced her that that was the purpose in using her name for leverage.
I don't understand the question, I'm sorry.
You used her intentionally for leverage for your own benefit.
Yes,
You were probably the first person on the planet to assert she was deceased. Do you know that?
that's not true.
You were referring to her as the late Jonelle Matthews decades before her body was found.
I'm not sure that's true.
Okay, we'll talk about that here in a little while. You certainly bristled at the very mention that the Lord himself had sent word that she would be found safe and reunited with her family.
I thought that was totally unethical.
And you referred to him as a false prophet.
I did not refer to him as a false prophet.
So wait a minute, let's go back. I want to talk about what you just said. A pastor saying, the Lord has sent a message through me that Jonelle Matthews will be found alive and reunited with her family, to use your words, is unethical?
Yes, I think if she's not found or not found alive, it would be giving false hope.
And at the time you said that, you knew she was deceased.
I did not know she was deceased.
You talked yesterday about these phases of your narrative, your agenda. And you said in phase 3, you believed, which you identified as somewhere around 2009, is that right? That was your phase 3?
Phase 3 would be about 2002 through about 2009.
2002 to 2009 was phase 3. And you said during that phase, that
I'm
time,
sorry, that would be, I guess that is phase 3.
okay. So sometime between the time frame of 2002 to 2009, you suspected that Jonelle Matthews could be in a septic tank on your New Raymer property?
That was my narrative.
Well, that wasn't part of your narrative. That's simply what you said yesterday. You remember that?
That was my narrative. I don't think I just simply said that yesterday.
Okay. What went through your mind when Detective Cash called you through the voice box in your Twin Falls, Idaho condominium?
I was thinking this was strange, it was unethical, because he knew I'd hired an attorney, and my attorney had told him I would not be available to him.
But then you went down and talked to him for a period of time anyway.
I was checking out what he was saying.
You were asked yesterday, we were talking earlier about this notion of the use of the word experiences. And on April 15th of 2013, you wrote to the district attorney's offices that some experiences are hard to forget. Do you remember that discussion with your attorney?
Yes,
And he asked you what the purpose of the letter was. Do you remember that?
yes,
And you remember your answer was, I can't really give a rational purpose for it. I was thinking of just moving on to other things, and it was just a last statement, a final statement.
yes,
You professed over the course of time to want to be transparent in all things regarding Jonelle Matthews.
yes,
And yet you wait until you're on trial for murder to say, I made it up.
yes,
But you've talked about in the past how you had received information under some kind of a pastoral confession,
yes,
and that didn't get anybody riled up and have the spotlight shown on you. So then you move on to the information I have, there's some smoke but no fire. And still no one paid attention to you, correct?
possibly.
You told anybody who would talk to you that you placed too much importance on me, and still nobody really paid attention, right? Because you're doing this for attention, right? You're claiming that all of these things about Jonelle Matthews in your mind for attention.
Yes,
Shortly after, you find out that not only is Harold Hicks dead, because you knew he had passed, but you found out from Angela that all of his cousins and brothers and all of his other relatives were deceased. You then introduce him into your narrative, right?
that's not true.
Oh, you didn't introduce him into your narrative shortly after that conversation with Angela?
That conversation with Angela never happened.
Because she's making that up.
Yes,
I think you referred to her yesterday as big of a liar as you are.
I don't remember saying that.
Okay. Your narrative changes in order to garner more attention to my father-in-law was approached by a cop who needs a body buried, but it would look bad for Steve. Right? That was your agenda, your narrative.
Oh, yes,
And then it was to what we heard yesterday. But as part of this, you still include things like Jonelle was dead before she crossed 10th Street. You've said that before, right?
yes,
That a trusted adult took her to an emergency room on 16th Street and she died along the way. You've said that.
not those words.
Okay. We'll talk about those specifics in a little while. You've used words to that effect, correct?
Yes,
You've said it's almost a certainty that the state will not solve this case without my help, correct?
I believe I said without a deal.
When Detective Prill was talking with you outside your home in Twin Falls, Idaho, he says to you, quote, okay, I wish you the best, excuse me, you said this to him. Okay, I wish you the best and I hope you resolve it. You remember hearing that and saying that?
I think so.
And Detective Prill said, well, it's going to be with the help of you. Just remember that. Remember him saying that to you?
He said something like that.
And that stopped you in your tracks, didn't it?
When he said, which is edited out, he said, I'm begging you, Steve, I'm begging you to talk to me.
That was edited out too.
That was edited out.
Impression management is huge for you, isn't it? Do you know what that means?
Can you, I don't understand what you just said.
Sure, you place a lot of stock in what other people see in you, what they think of you, and therefore you're managing your own impressions. That's big to you, isn't it?
I don't think so.
Wouldn't you agree with me, Mr. Pankey, that you've even hidden things from your own attorneys?
Yes,
In a jail call with your son, you specifically told him, "Don't tell my attorneys that we sold the condo." Right?
yes.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the things you did say yesterday. You said when you came to December 27th, 1984, in your narrative, this is the hard part. I swore to tell the truth, and now I have to tell the truth. Because that's one of the 10 Commandments, right?
Yes, that would be,
Thou shalt not lie.
yeah, that would be the 9th commandment.
What's the first?
The first is that you should love your God with all your heart, your soul, and your mind.
What's the one? What number is the one that says thou shalt not kill?
That would be the 6th commandment.
Tell me again. I'm going to let you go. Tell me again about what you did to that Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputy back in California. What'd you do?
You're talking about in the ambulance?
Yeah.
I took him, I put him on the stretcher, took him to the hospital, and he got treatment there. On the way, I did not treat. I let him scream and cry, and I did not put an air splint on his leg to support his leg.
Tell the jury again why you did that.
I did that because at the time I hated white cops that I had seen do terrible things to Hispanic people or humiliate them, hurt them.
Had you ever seen that cop do it?
No, I had not.
You tortured an innocent person because of the sins of others in your mind?
I did not torture him, but I did allow him to be tortured.
You refused to give him aid, hoping the injury would end that officer's career, were your words. Do you remember that?
Yes.
How long did you let him scream?
$8 minutes, 12 minutes.
Wow. Were you staring in his eyes the whole time?
No.
Did he beg you for help?
Yes.
What'd you say to him?
I said I couldn't do anything.
And you just stood there and watched.
I sat there and watched.
Sat there and watched another human being screaming in pain for 8 to 12 minutes because of perceptions that you had about something someone else did.
Yes.
You said when you worked for the Northern Colorado Detective Agency, They required you to carry a .38 revolver, but you never fired it?
That's true.
They never required you to train with it?
That's true.
They never required you to show any type of proficiency at all with a firearm
That's true.
before you carried it in the course of your responsibilities and duties?
That's true.
Did you ever think that might be a liability issue?
Yes, a guard was shot and killed shortly after I quit.
You did admit to us yesterday that you had fired a gun, out at the house in Kersey trying to hit a wooden post.
Yes,
So you know how to operate a firearm.
I don't think I really knew how to safely operate a firearm.
I didn't say safely. You knew that if you point a gun at something and you pull the trigger,
Yes,
bad things could happen.
yes,
I mean, you were trying to hit a wooden post.
yes.
And you were working for 7-Up between, you couldn't remember exactly the date, 1978 or 79, and you went to maybe 1981, you weren't sure?
Yes,
You very specifically told us, and we understand the importance of why, you very specifically told us you never owned a red or an orange car. Right?
there were, I couldn't pick the colors of cars that we got for the lot. I mean, I had red or orange cars on the lot, but I did not have the only car I had was a white Toyota on December 20th.
But you're right. There are red and orange and rust-colored cars on your lot, right?
Yes,
You were either working on them, or parting them out, or selling them.
right,
So whether you owned one or not is really irrelevant. You had access to red, orange, and rust brown-colored cars.
not on December 20th.
Yeah, you can't have one on December 20th, right? Because now we understand the importance of why. We'll talk about that in a little while, too. You want this jury to believe that magically the 2 credit cards showed up the day before you're leaving from your father.
I never said magically.
I did. That's
Yes,
my
you
word.
did.
They showed up at your house, ironically, the day before you're leaving on this planned trip.
Yes,
And you said they specifically arrived at 1 o'clock.
about 1 o'clock.
It's awfully specific, right? It's part of your narrative.
Part of the truth.
That part's the truth. Everything else is made up.
Objection,
I didn't
argument.
say that.
Sustained.
And you said when you got to California, your dad was mad because you had bought Pepsi with that credit card.
Yes.
How did he know?
Back in the day, they had a credit cards thing that you slid over, and you got one copy, and there was gas, and then there was a six-pack of Pepsi on there.
Oh, did you have to give your dad the receipts for the credit cards when you got there?
Yes,
And you want this jury to believe that back in the day, the little credit card machine was itemized?
yes,
And Mr. Pankey, I want to know this. Yesterday you said, you told this jury, on questioning from your attorney, you told him that when you were down in the holding cell preparing to testify, that certain topics you covered, you were told were, quote, bullshit and no one's going to buy that. Right?
yes.
What were those answers?
So I'm going to object to attorney-client privilege.
He said it on open court, Your Honor. He's waived it
We
at
need a
this point.
sidebar. Thank you, counsel. We'll overrule the objection. You may continue.
Mr. Pankey, what were the answers that you gave your attorney that you were told no one would believe?
I can't remember right now.
Oh, it's convenient that you can't remember something that happened yesterday.
I can't remember.
There were other times where you would give an answer and you were told, that's a good answer.
Objection, attorney-client privilege.
Overruled for the same reasons I indicated on the record.
Yes.
What were those answers? Can you remember those?
Not right now.
And do you recall telling this jury that when you were in the cubicle before coming to testify, that you prayed on the topic, and you told us maybe I shouldn't testify because I would just be telling more lies? Remember that?
I don't remember that exactly.
I'm totally humiliated. I wanted this handled in a lesser way.
Yes.
You told this jury yesterday that when you had met with Detective Statler and Agent Lyon, the basic reason that you were doing this was to get even with them. Right? That's what you told them yesterday.
I don't remember exactly saying that.
You went on to say, but in fact, there were some people in there that made statements in the 1976, 1977 period that would be considered racial. What does that mean?
You talking about at Sunnyview?
I don't know. You said it. I'm asking you what it meant.
It meant that there were statements that were made that would be not politically correct, I guess, today.
So when you're talking about in there, in there means in the church.
Yes.
And you felt really good after talking with law enforcement.
Yes.
You felt really good because they didn't have a clue you were a suspect at that point, right?
No.
You very specifically told this jury you did not talk to your father-in-law on December 27, 1984.
Yes.
And you were asked why you said that, or why you said you did. Quote, I said it to keep the lies, to keep the story going. Right?
I don't remember exactly saying that, but I don't deny it.
One lie leads to another.
Yes.
And then you were specifically asked again, why did you say you did talk to him if it wasn't true? Remember being asked a couple of times. Being asked that a couple of times.
I can't remember specifically being asked that, but I believe you that I was.
And you responded to your attorney again, quote, I needed an explanation as to what conversations I had, and that came to mind. What conversations did you need to explain?
I don't know, I don't remember the context you're talking about.
I just gave it to you. You were asked, why did you say you had talked to Harold Hicks if it wasn't true? Your answer, I needed an explanation as to what conversations I had, and that came to mind. What conversations?
Oh, that goes back to 1977 at the church, at Sunnyview Church of the Nazarene.
What conversations did you have in 1977 at the church, the Sunnyview Church of the Nazarene, that were relevant to whether or not you talked to Harold Hicks on December 27th, 1984?
Specifically, I guess there is no correlation there.
So that was just a nonsensical answer to a fairly straightforward question then? Is that what I understand?
No.
You also told this jury that you wanted to be consistently inconsistent in case Jim Matthews was ever arrested.
I did not want to be a witness against him.
You told this jury you never knew who Mr. Matthews was. How in the world would you be a witness?
I think I made it clear yesterday that Lieutenant Sun Valley Police Lieutenant Mark Lockwood.
Oh, trust me, we'll talk about that, Mr. Pankey, but that doesn't answer my question. You told this jury you never knew who Mr. Matthews was, yet you believed you were going to be called as a witness against him if he was ever arrested?
By what Lieutenant Mark Lockwood said, and yes, I never met the man.
So that answer yesterday was maybe just another opportunity to take a little dig at the Matthews family sitting in the courtroom watching you testify?
That is not true.
You were saying stuff that couldn't be backed up, so I couldn't be forced to testify against Mr. Matthews.
Yes.
You told us that the immunity you sought from Detective Cash was to be able to privately say what I publicly said today. Correct?
What date with Detective Cash are you talking about?
April 8th, 2019, when he called you.
Oh, yes.
You told us that
Yes.
you wanted immunity to be able to privately say you made this up so that you didn't have to publicly say you made it up.
Between you and Hornpack.
Did you say you needed immunity to privately say you made it up so that you wouldn't have to publicly say you made it up?
Yes.
What's immunity mean to you?
Immunity means is that you couldn't be charged.
That I wouldn't charge you, right?
In general, I couldn't be charged.
Okay,
It
fair
goes
enough.
beyond you.
Okay. How many times do you think you've been told that the only possible charges that you could face in the Jonelle Matthews case is murder and kidnapping?
I don't know how many times.
A lot, right?
Several at least.
And yet you still demand immunity, not a deal anymore, immunity.
Goes back to the 20 charges.
No, it doesn't. You're asking for immunity for murder and kidnapping to give up, please let me finish my question. You're asking for immunity, demanding it, for murder and kidnapping before you'll say anything about Jonelle Matthews. Repeatedly. Right?
You don't know what's in my head.
I'm trying to get there, but you're right, I don't.
Okay.
We're living in the last days. What's that mean?
Biblically, I think that the Bible predicts what's happening today. And I think we're living in the last days before the millennium.
The Bible is predicting what is happening to you.
The Bible is predicting what is happening in general.
And then finally you said you don't believe wanting a deal means you've done anything wrong. You said that, right?
I think I think that goes along with like the fifth, taking the fifth. Yes, I think that it means that it can mean you did something wrong, you did something partially wrong, or nothing wrong at all.
In part, the Fifth Amendment protects one against self-incrimination, being forced to self-incriminate.
Yes.
And you've always said that you want to make sure that your Fifth Amendment rights are protected.
Yes.
Now, what you talked about yesterday was your motive for this grandiose, elaborate lie that you have talked about is to get back at, to retaliate against Russ Ross, Sunnyview Church of the Nazarene, and the Greeley Police Department. Right?
That's partially right.
Let me ask the question, did I leave anybody out? Are you trying to get back to anybody else?
I didn't want to be forced to testify against Jim Matthews.
Another little dig at Mr. Matthews who's sitting in the courtroom?
Objection.
It is not a dig.
Sustained.
I'll withdraw. You told us yesterday that you had a good working relationship with your manager, your boss, Terry Salison, until John Gates badmouthed you?
Yes.
What did John Gates say about you, Mr. Pankey?
That's part of the protected stuff.
Excuse me? What protected stuff?
The stuff that the judge ruled on.
Oh, no. See, Mr. Pankey, what happens is when you get on the stand and you give an answer like that, you have to answer my questions too. How did John Gates badmouth you?
Regarding my past sexuality.
He badmouthed you because you were homosexual?
Counsel? I want to sidebar, please.
Yeah.
Judge, I'll withdraw the question. I'll move on.
I want to make sure we have sidebar.
Okay.
Real quick.
Okay.
We may need to use a different microphone for a sidebar next time. Am I right?
Okay.
Were you able to hear? Was anybody able? Okay.
I had the device
Maybe it
over
came
here.
through here. That's fine. All right, thank you. Mr. Rourke?
Thank you, Judge. You told us you thought Russ Ross was a jerk,
Yes.
but you didn't follow him around town.
No.
You told this jury that after the lawsuit, the 7-Up lawsuit, that you never tried to get revenge against Ross.
That's true.
You didn't like Ross, but there was nothing you could do about it. That's what you told us.
That's true.
You talked about how you began a very bitter retaliation against Sun Valley, Russ Ross, and Jim Christie because you hated those men. Your words, not mine. Correct?
When you say Sun Valley, do you mean Sunnyview?
I do. Sunnyview.
Can you repeat the question now correctly?
Sure I can. You told us that you began a very bitter relationship with Sunnyview Church of the Nazarene, Russ Ross, and Jim Christie because you hated those men.
Yes, sir.
You were humiliated by Russ Ross holding you down and you were being punched by somebody else. You were humiliated.
I didn't say he held me down, he held me.
While somebody else punched you?
Yes.
And you were-
You keep adding more than I said or did.
They're my questions, Mr. Pankey. If you disagree with them, you can correct them. But somebody else punched you.
Yes.
But you were humiliated by Russ Ross, not the guy who hit you.
I was humiliated by both of them.
Did you engage in some kind of a revenge effort against Alan Pierre? Isn't he the guy that hit you?
No.
No. He's not the guy that hit you, or you didn't engage in retaliation against him? Which is it?
That was a different instance.
Oh. Who's the guy that hit you on this occasion that you're talking about?
His first name was Blaine, I can't remember his last name.
But he wasn't part of your motive, your revenge efforts, Blaine?
No.
Just Russ? Just Russ.
Yeah.
And you talked quite a bit yesterday about having zero trust in the Greeley Police Department, the Weld County Sheriff's Office, or law enforcement generally. No trust.
I think you're exaggerating again. I said the first two, but I don't think I said law enforcement generally.
Okay. You don't trust the Greeley Police Department or the Weld County Sheriff's Office?
I didn't trust them, no.
And to be clear, you've already told us, you've already demonstrated a willingness to assist law enforcement in cases that you're not a suspect, that you didn't do anything wrong, right?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Were you a confidential informant in the United States Army in a
Yes, I was.
in a drug trial?
Yes, I was.
You didn't have anything to do with selling drugs.
No.
You weren't a mule. You weren't the money guy. You weren't keeping the ledgers. You provided information.
All of the above.
Because you didn't have anything to do with it. Right? And did you testify?
I was called to testify, but I didn't actually testify.
But you were ready, willing, and able to assist in that investigation, first as confidential informant and then to testify in court if needed.
It was a deal worked out over my homosexual issue. I was not like my heart wasn't into the testimony and doing what I was doing. And that's part of what built me up to things that happened later.
It really didn't matter to you what happened in that case. Is that what I'm hearing you say? I want to make sure I understand. You said your heart wasn't in it. It didn't really matter how the outcome.
I hated what I was doing.
Did you tell us that you had applied with the Greeley Police Department before as a police officer?
Yeah, before you chuckled and I stopped that, so. Can I explain that?
Did you tell us that you admitted to a homosexual history and so therefore you didn't get hired? Is that right?
Yes.
The agency that you don't trust, you applied to and they rejected you?
Before I had a problem.
Oh. Well, that's interesting, Mr. Pankey. Tell me when the problem arose. Just a date. All I want is a date. What is the date that these problems arose with the Greeley Police Department and the Weld County Sheriff's Office?
I can't give an exact date because you're talking over 40 years ago.
Okay, are we talking the 60s?
You're talking sometime in 77.
77. That's fair. 77, whatever happened, happened, and you began not to trust the Greeley Police Department and the Weld County Sheriff's Office. Right?
Yes.
Yet, in GPD case report 78-12335, you called the police to report an assault at the Sunnyview Church of the Nazarene. You sought their help.
Yes.
You sought their help when you claimed the Nazarene robbed you in case number 78-2310. You sought their help again.
I don't know the case numbers. I did seek their help.
Okay. You trusted them enough to call when you needed assistance.
Had I called the Denver police over a Greeley matter, they would have said call Greeley police.
You trusted Greeley enough to call them to report
Yes.
crimes when you were a victim. Or when you were a witness, right? Victim or witness. right?
Yes,
Because in 1979, you called the Greeley Police Department for their assistance when Angela was being harassed by juveniles. Remember that?
I do not remember that.
In 1979, you also reported a suspicious person with a gun.
I don't remember that.
In 1979, you also called as a victim of a menacing, claiming that you were menaced with a blue revolver. Somebody threatened you with a blue revolver.
I flat don't remember that.
You called the Greeley Police Department in 1980 to report just generally suspicious activity under their case number 80-15681.
I don't remember that.
You called the Greeley Police Department when your car was broken into at the 7-Up offices.
Absolutely.
You needed their help.
Yes.
In 1981, you called them to report violation of a restraining order. Remember that?
So I don't object, I don't know where we're going with this, but
Just the fact that he called or not.
okay.
Do you remember calling
So
about a violation of a
the
restraining order?
the question asks whether you called or not. If you recall whether you called the Greeley Police Department or not, that's all it's asking for.
I don't remember that.
You called the Greeley Police Department, if you recall, in 1984, when you say that Mary Carpenter ran you off the road.
I don't remember that specifically.
In 1986, you called the Greeley Police Department to report that you were being harassed by Richard Townsend.
I don't remember that specifically.
Now let's talk about the sheriff's office. You called the sheriff's office in 1984 because you were being harassed by somebody named Florence Chavez. You remember that?
No.
You called them in 1985 over a vehicle repossession. Remember that?
Is that one that, what?
Is that the record? Is that when you were called about the repossession of the wrecker off of Aaron's Autos lot? Do you remember that?
You're saying I called them
Yes. You were the reporting party.
over repossession?
That's right.
When?
1985.
What month?
March of 1985.
Okay, that would have been the Datsun 610 wagon that was repossessed.
Okay. So you remember calling the sheriff's office on that occasion?
I don't specifically remember that.
Okay. Also in 1985, you called to simply report a male subject was passed out where you were. You were calling for somebody to bring assistance, to get assistance. Do you remember that?
When is this?
1985. And if you don't remember, that's fine. I'm just asking if you remember.
I don't remember.
Okay. In 1985, you were also contacted about contact regarding the wrecker that you had as part of Aaron Auto,
And what date?
January of 1985.
January what?
January 16th, 1985.
Yes,
Remember that one?
yes.
And finally, in 1986, you called to report to the Weld County Sheriff's Office that you had received threats, again, from Richard Townsend. You remember that?
I do not.
14 times. Over the course of 8 years, you called the very law enforcement agencies you claim not to trust to report a crime, either against you or against somebody else.
There were people in those law enforcement agencies that I didn't like, but I didn't know everybody.
And yet you want this jury to believe that part of the motivation behind your grandiose 37-year narrative mistruth is to get back at the Greeley Police Department.
I don't think that's what I'm trying to do, but
You talked yesterday about the fact that there was no car fire on the property December 20th of 1984, but that you specifically recall a fire at the Snyder's home in either June or July of 1984.
Around there, yes,
Positive of that time frame.
yes,
And that after that fire, you took a vehicle to Kenny Anderson at Anderson Salvage to get salvage value for.
yes,
But it was the Snyder's car.
yes.
Do you know that Mr. Snyder was interviewed about that?
I am told that.
And he said the fire was in 1976.
Judge, objection, hearsay.
I can
Sustained.
impeach him with hearsay, Your Honor. Okay.
Sustained.
You knew more than nothing about the Matthews neighborhood, right? Did you know that there were 2 cops that lived in the neighborhood?
I was told that at Faith Ministries Church.
And you reported that in a conversation that you had with a Weld County Sheriff's Office deputy, that you knew that there were 2 deputies that lived in the neighborhood, or 2 officers, I should say.
When,
You remember talking to a Sergeant Hood with the Weld County Sheriff's Office and saying that you knew there were law enforcement neighbors that...
give me
Mr. Pankey, can I please finish my question? Do you remember talking to a sheriff's deputy and telling him that you knew that there were 2 law enforcement officers that lived in Jonelle Matthews' neighborhood? Do you remember that?
you have to give me a time frame.
March 18th, 1985.
He had come to the court when I was at court. And that conversation happened, yes.
Yeah, you told him that you knew that there were 2 law enforcement officers that lived in Miss Matthews' neighborhood.
Yes, I'd heard that at church.
But yet Peggy Drake, who lived across the street, didn't know that there were law enforcement officers in the neighborhood.
Objection, argumentative.
Sustained.
Now, yesterday you talked about this bank incident with Alan Schultz on December 19th, 1984.
Yes,
And I think what you told us was that the last vehicle that was on the lot was a 1-ton truck that the bank was going to repossess.
besides the 1980 Toyota.
Right. And that you, on December 19th, called Mr. Schultz and you wanted that 1-ton truck, the wrecker, off of your property.
On
Right.
what date now?
December 19th. You testified.
Yes, yes,
And you told him that you wanted that wrecker off of your property.
yes,
And you told Mr. Schultz that you were going to have your neighbor pull it out onto the road and park it down the street, and Schultz told you you couldn't do that.
yes,
And then you went to the bank and talked to Schultz about this.
yes,
That was the Norbel Credit Union.
yes,
And Mr. Schultz didn't want to hire a wrecker to recover the one that was on your property,
yes,
and so therefore he wouldn't let you cash a check, because he was now mad at you. You got into an argument and he wouldn't let you cash a check.
I was behind on my payments there, and they would not let me cash the check.
And ultimately, the police were called,
Yes,
and a report was taken
yes,
by Keith Olson. Did you know that?
I had no idea that.
And Mark Blaskowitz. And
Right.
Officer Blaskowitz testified in this trial. You recall that? Early on.
Yes,
And talked about coming into contact with you at the Norbel Credit Union,
yes,
just a couple of blocks from here.
yes,
And you were arrested,
yes,
charged with, you said on one occasion harassing him, but then you clarified that you thought it was disturbing the peace. Correct?
correct.
Incidentally, what car did you drive to the bank that night, that day?
White Toyota Corolla, the only car I had.
Do you remember where you parked?
I do not.
I presume it was close to the bank? I mean, you wouldn't park blocks away, right? If you know.
I don't remember parking that day.
Okay. When you were arrested, you were taken to the jail.
Yes,
The jail was actually right where we're seated right now, correct?
I am told that.
And how long were you at the Weld County Jail that day, on the 19th? Roughly. I'm not going to hold you to a number figure, but roughly how long were you there?
I can make an arbitrary, an hour, I don't know.
That's fair. When you were released, how'd you get home?
I walked to the car.
Okay. And then you drove that white Corolla that you're talking about back to 6086 West 10th Street.
Yes.
If I may have just a moment, Your Honor.
You may.
You told this jury yesterday that you never had a good marriage with Angela.
Yes.
And you told us that she was a virgin when you started dating.
Yes.
Did you really tell us that the act of making love to her was an act of mercy?
I had said that to her on at least one occasion.
And you told us some other things that I don't need to repeat about your intimacy or lack thereof with Miss Higgs, right?
Yes.
And you referred to yourself as a dumb blonde,
Yes.
which, as you know, oftentimes has a negative connotation towards women. Did you know that?
I thought it had more negative towards blondes, but
And we heard that there was violence in your marriage with Angela.
Objection, Your Honor. Beyond the scope, 403, 404,
Yep. I need a sidebar, please.
401.
You know, for proof. All right, thank you, counsel.
Do you remember Ms. Hicks testifying that there was generally violence in your relationship?
I don't remember offhand her saying that.
In June of 2011, you wrote a letter to my office, correct?
I don't remember that.
You don't remember writing a letter to my office in 2011?
I remember writing off letters to your office, more than one.
Let me just have one moment, Judge.
You may.
And I'm sorry, I misstated the date, Mr. Pankey. August 14th, 2013. You wrote a letter to the district attorney's office addressed to Keith Olson. Do you remember that?
I remember writing the letter, I don't remember the date.
It was admitted in this trial as Exhibit 177.
I don't see, if they're up on the screen, I see them, but I don't get handed.
August 14th, 2013, Exhibit 177. We'll come back to that. We're having some tech issues, as has been the case during the course of this trial. Let's talk about Mark Lockwood.
Okay,
You told us yesterday that when you were trying to advance in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, it was suggested by church officials that you have a conversation with Mark Lockwood.
yes,
You had told, I think you identified this person as the bishop. Do I have that right?
stake president.
State president.
Well, it was the bishop to the stake president.
Okay. You told the bishop that you were bothered by this girl situation, and I think, you said Idaho, but I think you meant Colorado. Were you talking about this girl situation in Colorado?
Yes,
You were talking about Jonelle Matthews.
yes,
And that the state president suggested then that you go talk to Mark Lockwood about this girl issue that's bothering you.
correct.
And it was your testimony that he walked in to this meeting with you with this big file,
On the second meeting.
second meeting. And you said that was the file, he told you that was the file on Jonelle Matthews.
That's correct.
You think that the Greeley Police Department sent the entire case file to Mark Lockwood in Idaho.
I don't know that.
And you want this jury to believe that Mark Lockwood had the information about the rakings in the snow?
Yes,
And you went on to tell us that Lockwood told you that Jim Matthews raked the snow outside his house.
yes,
That Mr. Matthews accused you, according to Mr. Lockwood, right?
that is not true.
And Lockwood asked you if Jim Matthews had asked you to take a body away. You said that that's what Lockwood asked you.
Not in those similar words, but it was something similar to that.
And Lockwood told you that there were footprints in the snow and that they had been raked.
He told me that Jim Matthews had raked footprints in the snow. I think he specifically said looking for something, but
And you claim that during this second meeting, or at some point, Lockwood took your DNA.
Yes.
How did he do that?
He told me to drink, he had this orange pop can there, like the cheap Shastas type stuff. And he asked me to drink it, and I took a few drinks. He grabbed the cup, or grabbed the can, and he said, I'm gonna have this process to take your DNA. And I said, okay.
But you heard testimony that law enforcement wasn't collecting DNA in 92 or 93. It wasn't being used yet.
That is totally untrue. You are totally false.
Well, what's totally false, Mr. Pankey, is that Mark Lockwood sat on that stand and said, I never had that conversation with Steve Pankey.
He was understating.
He wasn't understating anything. He sat there and told this jury that he never spoke with you about any of this.
He was understating on the witness stand.
Was he understating, or are you accusing him of committing perjury?
Okay, objection, argumentative.
I'll sustain.
Are you saying that he testified falsely to this jury?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Instead, what he testified to was that he had responded to a hospital, came into contact with you, and there was very, very brief conversation that you might have information about a missing person, a missing child in Colorado. He suggested that you contact the Greeley Police Department and help that family relieve their anxieties, and your response with that you responded that you had been a subject or a person of interest for many years, and that would put you in a tough situation. That's the sum and substance of Lockwood's testimony about his contact with you.
I agree that that was his testimony.
Do you recall that Mark Lockwood was also specifically asked whether or not he had a file on Jonelle Matthews, and he flat out denied having a file at all?
I don't remember that specifically.
I want to talk about Angela for a few minutes. I've already alluded to it this morning that you testified yesterday that she lied. She got on the stand and lied. Is that right?
Yes.
So I'm curious then, Mr. Pankey, what's her motive? In your mind, what is Angela Hick's motive for lying about you in a murder trial?
Objection, speculation.
Sustained.
Do you think she wants money?
Yes.
And what money would she be able to get a hold of?
My inheritance, she had sent an email to my sister wanting $100,000 for her retirement.
When did that email get sent?
It would have been before I was arrested.
That letter, email, if it exists, would be pretty good motive for her, right?
Yes.
Where's the letter? Where's the email?
I don't have it.
Did you give it to your attorney?
It's my understanding that my sister had given it to my attorney, but I don't know that.
This inheritance that you're talking about is sizable.
Yes.
Over $1 million.
Yes.
Objection, relevance.
It's very relevant. He just asserted finances as a motive,
Overruled.
right? It's over $1 million.
Yes.
And regardless of how this trial turns out, whether you're convicted or not, there is no legal way that Angela Hicks can get any of that money under the terms of your divorce, correct?
Correct.
Any other reason you can think of that she would get on the stand and lie about something that happened 37 years ago?
a woman scorned, and that it would cut off, if I was convicted, it would cut off my relationship with Mark.
So she's held this grudge in your mind for whatever happened during your marriage and whatever caused your divorce for decades before she extracted her measure of revenge against you from that witness stand?
Objection argumentative.
Overruled.
A woman scorned, that's all I know.
You told us that by June or July, Arenado was defunct.
June, July, August.
Was out of business?
Yes,
Certainly, you're not going to put any more money into a business that's defunct, right? You're not going to spend money on a business that doesn't exist.
yes.
You took out an ad in the Johnson phone book, August of 1984, for Arenado.
Okay.
Why would you do that if it was out of business?
I was possibly thinking of being somewhat of a competitor of Kenny Anderson's, limited to Datsuns and Toyotas, but that was scrapped before the end of the year.
You took out the ad, though, in August of '84 in the Johnson phone book for Arenado.
Yes,
You took out another ad in December of '84 for Arenado in the Mountain Bell phone book.
okay.
Because Arenado can't exist in December of 1984 in your narrative, right? Because if it does, there's multiple cars on the property.
That's not true.
Now, this might be a good time to take a break for lunch.
Certainly, that's reasonable. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be in recess. We'll have a lunch break until 1:30. I ask again that you not discuss the case with anyone. That includes people involved in the trial, other jurors, or anyone else. That you not read or listen to any news reports of the trial, to not in any way try to gain any information about this case outside of the courtroom. That includes refraining from researching on the internet, medical law books, encyclopedias, or dictionaries. The social media advisement continues throughout the trial. Finally, it's especially important that you not form or express any opinion on the case until it is finally submitted to you. So I wish you good lunch, and I'll be back, please, at 1:30. Thank you. Please rise. Please be seated. Mr. Pankey, sir, you're welcome to go back to the table, please. Counsel, any issues we need to address before we take a lunch break?
Not for me, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
Very well. Back at 1:30, please. Thank you.
Rob, would you grab that one binder? It's not quite lighter, is it?
Oh, I thought you said water. Sorry.
That was what you paid for it at some point earlier before the actual, yeah, it actually came out. Wasn't that gonna be your testimony? You paid for it at some time?
Yeah. Counsel? You got the earpieces. Oh.
Holding one. Get it.
think they told you, I don't know if they did, but sidebars really are anytime we excuse the jury, and if the light goes on. Okay. I don't know if you're recording, but those two, teach you to just turn it off. We had some reporting on it. I don't think it was very intentional. We had some reporting on some issues in the middle of the trial.
Oh,
that were-
but not today.
No, not today, but it was supposed to be,
Yeah.
as if, I can clear the courtroom, or I can just have it that everybody understands sort of like not to talk about it.
Yeah.
And so
So
I haven't done anything about it, but I don't intend to, I just
Right.
make sure.
So the audio is buzzed, but you want me to also like black out the camera during that time? During sidebar?
As long as they don't catch what we're talking about.
Right,
Yeah, that's all I care about. I just don't want anybody reporting,
So it's not on you?
the judge, there's whatever, some damning evidence or whatever that I excluded, or the opposite, something that I ruled upon